Street photography is unforgiving. It's a genre of photography that's really hinging on the amount of experience you already have. You can't expect to go out there and come away with the perfect image in just one day. These are just some tips that have helped me in the past, and possibly they'll help you as well. This is part 2 of my street photography tips series on this channel. You know, planning is really an aspect of street photography that I think gets overlooked by many beginner photographers. And I think if you're new to the genre and you're struggling with your location or just coming away with anything that interests you, doing a little planning beforehand can help you out immensely. There's been plenty of times where I've gone out and just expected to take photographs that were interesting without any real plan of where I wanted to shoot or how I wanted to shoot. That lack of planning often resulted in myself coming back home empty-handed and not having anything really interesting. And maybe you've been there before. You've gone out and shot for hours and you don't see anything that strikes your interest. Maybe you give up and you pack your camera away and go home. I think if you're a beginner to street photography, planning is essential. You don't want to put yourself in a situation, like I just said, where you don't see anything and spend all this time doing street photography but come away with nothing that makes you happy. It's gonna be a big turnoff and you're less likely to go back out there and do it again. So I can't stress enough the importance of doing a little bit of planning before you do street photography, especially if you're very new to street photography. Now, a lot of street photography is not planned, capturing those candid, spontaneous moments, but there's also a degree of planning of putting yourself in position to take those types of photographs. A lot of master photographers will go that extra mile and plan out their shots. Some will pinpoint the exact location they want to document at a certain amount of time because they know the light's going to hit at this intersection where people are crossing. Maybe they just know that they want to go out and take photos on the subway during rush hour because they want to document the expressions on people's faces while they're coming back home after long hours at work. Or maybe they've been just doing a little bit of research and have been seeing that there's these demonstrations happening in their city. And they know that tomorrow at a certain time that the demonstrations are going to be happening. So they plan for it, get their camera and go there and document the demonstrations. You see what I'm saying? If you do a little bit of planning, you're more likely to come away with photos that you're happy about. You can't always expect to get out there and come away with an amazing photograph. Putting yourself in position to take interesting photographs is something that's kind of often overlooked by many people, and I don't think it's really discussed a lot when we're talking about street photography and trying to improve at this genre. But reflect on your own experience. If you find yourself struggling to come away with interesting photographs, do a little bit of planning before your next time shooting and see if that helps you. Some of you might be already familiar with the concept of taking visual notes while you're out shooting. If you don't know what this means, basically if you're out shooting and you see something that is interesting to you but it's just not perfect enough for you to take that shot. Say you see a scene and you're like, man, if just someone was wearing red and was standing under this sign or whatever it is, it would make the picture perfect. Don't just keep walking on because it didn't work out. Stick around a bit and take a photo of it anyway. This will serve you as a visual note that you can come back to and remember that, oh, this was a scenario that might lead to an interesting photograph. And I'll just keep coming back to this spot and see if it works out again. Some people will take this photo with their camera. Personally, I will take it with my cell phone's camera and quickly put it into an album where I have all my visual notes of potential spots to take photographs. I do it on my phone just because it's just a lot more easier to access and I'm less likely to forget about it because I'm already just putting it into the album right there when I'm taking the photo. This is kind of relating to the planning tip I had earlier. When you feel a little stuck about what to photograph, you can always come back to these photos, these visual notes, and kind of inspire yourself to go back to those locations and see if you can get that perfect shot. Something that a lot of new street photographers will overlook is how much your body language can change the way a person reacts to when you take a photo. If you're worried about getting in confrontations with people on the street while doing street photography, focus on having less unassuming body language. That could be as much as just smiling and acknowledging the subject you're taking a photo of. It's not going to help you out if you have a mean mug or a death stare when you're taking a photo of someone. They're going to feel a lot more threatened by your presence and are more likely to confront you and ask you what you're doing. If you're smiling, they'll probably look at you and like, okay, he's just someone who's happily taking photos on the street. They might not even approach you if you're smiling. But you know, just having that unassuming body language, it will prevent you from looking less suspicious and less likely to cause trouble. Say someone is walking by and they have a cool looking hat or something, and that's why you took a photo of them. They stop you and ask you why you just took a photo of them. Literally the worst thing you could do in that situation is come up with a random excuse, or even worse, say you didn't take a photo of them. That will just be asking for trouble. The best thing you can do in that situation is just say what it is about the person that made you want to take a photograph of them. They'll be a lot more accepting of that than if you just came up with a lie. If you stumble and think of something up right on the spot, you're just gonna look like you were caught doing something bad that you knew you should have been doing, when that really isn't the case. So if someone asks you why you took a photo of them, just be honest as to why. After that, you can go on to explain that you're a street photographer. If you have a small photo book, which I mentioned this tip in my last tips video, you can show them that portfolio of work, and they'll be a lot more convinced of what you're doing and that you are indeed a street photographer. This was something that really helped me in my early years of doing street photography. Now, let's be honest, street photography can be very nerve-wracking, especially if you're very new to this genre. It can feel like you have this huge spotlight on you when you're out in public with your camera and you're taking pictures of people. Even more so if you have a GoPro strapped to your chest, like I do when I'm doing POV videos. But really all of that kind of disappeared when I shoot with other people. When I was with someone, I was always more likely to take photos that I wouldn't necessarily take if I was by myself. It's kind of like a mental reassurance that, you know, if something happens or something goes wrong, I'll have backup. So if you find yourself hesitating a lot, first of all, you're not alone. That's like a very common thing that all street photographers experience. Just see if you can go out shooting with a buddy. Best to do this with a buddy that's also a street photographer, just because they'll be a lot more understanding in, you know, the irregular pace of you walking super fast and then super slow and then just waiting for a shot to happen. And they'll just be less of a distraction to you as you take photos. You know, what's really the point of having a buddy with you to help you out with street photography if you're less likely to take photos because you're distracted by the person you're with? One other thing is, don't let this become a crutch, just because I do think it is important for you to learn to shoot by yourself. So, you know, just take the things that you learn while shooting with a buddy and take that over to when you do shoot by yourself, and you'll be on your way. Working the scene as a street photographer is probably the best thing you can do for yourself. Every moment, every scene is really once in a lifetime if you really think about it. I think it was Eric Kim who mentioned this in one of his blog posts, and he said that you want to be picky with the moments you photograph, but very generous in the amount of photos you take of that moment. Now, he was talking about shooting on film, but you know, this also applies to digital. If you see a once in a lifetime moment happen in front of you, and you know what that looks like, and you'll know what that feels like to see that, man, take as many photographs of it as you can. And what I mean by that is taking as many photographs from as many different perspectives and different angles as you can. Trust me, you will be glad that you did. You don't want to come away with one photograph. You know, sometimes that one shot is either out of focus or you completely miss the shot. As a street photographer, you can't be satisfied with one or two photographs. When you think of street photography and lenses, you probably first think of a 35mm or maybe a 28mm. Something wide enough to get the full frame in the shot. If you're used to shooting at these focal lengths, I encourage you to actually try shooting in longer focal lengths. It will refreshen your perspective of street photography if you do this, just because it's such a different way of doing street photography. With a longer focal length, you have less to work with, and as a result, you have to focus more on your composition. It's actually much harder to compose shots with wider focal lengths anyway, so you might have an easier time doing this. But you also will be forced to kind of slow down too. So your process will probably change a lot by doing this, but I think it's helpful for you as a photographer to try different focal lengths just so you can refreshen your perspective on this genre and maybe come away learning something new in the process. You know, as someone who's not really into getting into the faces of their subjects, I find that shooting with longer focal lengths, like an 85mm, I get to be close to the subject without physically being close and less likely to disrupt the moment. Shooting at longer focal lengths is also something that might help you if you're a beginner to street photography, because if you find yourself just less likely to take photos because of a wider focal length, because you have to be up close to your subjects, and you're just less likely to take photos because you're nervous about that, try out longer focal lengths. That might help you get more photos because you're just more comfortable with that focal length. There's no point in making street photography harder for you, especially if you're new to the genre. All right, that wraps up today's video and part 2 of street photography tips. Street photography is not a friendly genre. You're bound to get frustrated and come away disappointed not having that shot that you wanted because you missed it due to one reason or another, but every street photographer experiences that. A book that I recently picked up is MAGNUM Contact Sheets, and I highly recommend you to grab this book. It's an incredible value for the price, but you really get to see the process of many of the greatest street photographers and documentary photographers ever past, and how they work. You'll see that they have so many shots that are bad, and those aren't the shots that you see. They pick and choose the good shots, and you know, every photographer is gonna have those bad shots. At the end of the day, the world keeps on moving, and really that's a good thing for you, because it just means that there's gonna be more moments for you to photograph in the future. If you feel like you learned something in this video, or if you're interested in street photography, I'll be making a ton more videos on this channel. Subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.